All right, well, welcome everyone to our bi-weekly Getting Hybrid Work Right call series. Welcome those new faces that haven't joined us before. Welcome to those that are returning. I see lots of names and locations of folks from in the chat. Please introduce yourself. Lots of returning folks, always great to see that. I think I've seen folks from Mexico, Canada, all across the United States. Please introduce yourself and then keep the chat open. We'll be using the chat throughout the time today. So feel free to ask questions, leave comments as we proceed. If you're new to these Getting Hybrid Work Right calls, you might be new to I4CP as well. We are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. That's what I4CP stands for. We discover the people practices that truly drive high performance across organizations, across really all industries. And we do that by performing quantitative studies, surveys on a wide range of human capital and human resources topics. And we like to correlate the data we get from the questions on those various topics to what we define high performance as. And that's revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction over a 5-year period. And what that analysis allows us to do is tease out the sort of best practices and what we like to call next practices. Those practices in human resources and human capital, your people practices that correlate to high performance, but that very few companies are doing. We also provide a lot of peer connections amongst our member organizations. I4CP is a member-driven community. You see here just a small sample of our many, many member companies. You can see they range from really big companies like Amazon and Accenture and 3M. You see companies here that are a little bit on the smaller side. You see companies across all different industries. So if you're with one of our members and on the call today, welcome. We're always so happy to have you join us on these Thursdays. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and every other Thursday, I have the pleasure of co-hosting this call with our co-founder and CEO, Kevin Oakes. Hi, Kevin.
I think the pleasure's all mine, Tom. Hi, Tom. Good to see you.
Good to be with you again. As I've said, this is a bi-weekly series that we have every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. You see the next one in the series will be on the 18th, where we'll be joined with Rob Cross, who's one of our longtime partners in research and studying networking theory and collaboration. And he's a multiple book author from Babson College. We're excited to have him on the 18th. Before that, we'll have our other series, which alternates with this one, which is our Next Practices Now series. And there we focus on different areas of HR. You see, we'll be focused on talent acquisition with Andrea from Mondelez on the 11th, strategic HR with Amaris from CPSI on the 25th. And we sort of rotate, between that series and the Getting Hybrid Work Right. You can register for both of these out at our website. Zeta will put the link to that in the chat. Good to get it on your calendar. We do record the call, so if you miss one, you can always go back and watch the recording, but at least this way it's on your calendar and you'll be reminded each week that it's coming up. Also want to remind everyone that we have an annual in-person conference. Of course, we had to miss it for a couple of years due to COVID, but we were delighted to get back together again with about 400 high-level HR leaders, a lot of CHROs, chief learning officers, chief diversity officers, and others in Scottsdale, Arizona in March. So we're back on track with our annual March conference. One tweak is that it is now both in-person and virtual. So we're happy to open it up to virtual attendees as well. That way we have a much broader reach. You see here, it's at the lovely Fairmont in Scottsdale. We don't have any vendors or consultants at this conference. There's no trade show, no expo, just great, outstanding speakers, book authors, thought leaders, CHROs, even some CEOs from corporations talking about their next and best practices. Kevin, anything other you want to say on that? I know we're going to be announcing some of the speaker lineup here coming up.
No, I just can't wait to get back there. The conference this past March was fantastic. I think everybody was just really happy to be back in person, and we expect this to be our most attended conference we've ever done. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also great for those of us that live in northern climates to get out of that weather in March for sure. We are a research organization, as I mentioned earlier. This is our latest major study that we released, the Talent Imperative. We did this in partnership with Fortune magazine. We've done both a conference presentation, several webinars on this in partnership with some of the leaders at Fortune. it's all about how you retain, attract, and develop talent during these very, very different working times, the difficult labor market that we're all facing, even with some modifying of that maybe in recent weeks in some industries. It's still obviously very much a job seekers market. So if you're an I4CP member, you can download the full Talent Imperative report. If you're not a member, there is an executive brief and a few other articles that are available to you, open to the public. So we'd encourage you to do that. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to you, Kevin, to introduce our special guest today.
All right, thanks, Tom. I know you'll be monitoring the chat, and I encourage our audience to post any questions they have in the chat for our very special guest, which is Karen Pavlin. Karen, just we're thrilled to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Tom. It's just a pleasure to be here and happy to have this conversation.
Well, as everybody can see, Karen's the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer at ServiceNow. And Karen, you joined ServiceNow earlier this year after over 4 years at Accenture, and you had a long career at Xerox. In fact, we were talking about Rochester, New York, where Tom is located, and where Xerox had been for many, many years before we started here. So tell us a little bit about your journey. I think we'd also love to hear a little bit about what your role is at ServiceNow, and also just about ServiceNow, because I think there's probably some folks on the line that aren't quite sure what ServiceNow does as a company.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And, I love to tell the story because I will tell you my career journey was not a linear one at all. But just a quick, background before I start to talk about how I came to ServiceNow. After I graduated from University of Virginia with both my undergrad and grad, as Kevin mentioned, I spent some time in Rochester. I spent a little over 20 years at Xerox. So, and in various leadership positions and roles on the technology side mostly, but I spent time on the global alliance side working with strategic alliance partners. And the last 8 years, I served as the client managing director for Xerox's top 25 financial services clients. I then went to Accenture and I spent 4 years as a client account leader for financial services as a managing director. And I came to, as Kevin mentioned, I came to ServiceNow in just January. It's been 8 months. It's been an incredible 8 months. Outside of work, I sit on 2 boards. I'm on the board of iMentor, which is one of the largest mentoring programs for underserved high school kids all over the country, matching professionals with a one-on-one mentoring experience. And I also sit on the board of the Apollo Theater up in Harlem. So how I got to ServiceNow, before I joining ServiceNow, I really had to think long and hard about my career and my career journey. And I'm one of those believers that life is just not a series of just random coincidences, but it's a series of lived experiences, people that touch your lives as far as leaders and peers and colleagues that bring you to places that you're supposed to be. So fun fact, my first boss ever after I graduated from the University of Virginia was Bill McDermott, who took the helm at ServiceNow in 2019 after stints at both Xerox for, I believe he was there for about 17 years, and then he was the CEO of SAP. And I will tell you that Bill was an early diversity champion. For me, he was the first one that demonstrated and modeled inclusion and belonging before it was a thing. And we're talking 30 years ago. I'm going to date myself, absolutely. But Bill was that first person to give me a seat at the table. Really before there was very few, women and people of color in technology sales. And it was, I always kind of use this analogy because way back then, he was such an incredible, inspiring sales coach. He was this player coach. And he was the one that kind of taught me the importance of relationship capital and, more importantly, how to model inclusion and belonging. So seeing Bill's commitment to ensuring that women that look like me had a seat at the table, the decision to come to ServiceNow was pretty obvious. I also joined ServiceNow purely based on the business. As a part of my role as a client account leader at Accenture, I couldn't get enough of partnering with the ServiceNow team. So they were part of our ecosystem partners, a billion plus partner for Accenture. And so I knew the brand and the trajectory of the company. And then the last reason I decided to join ServiceNow really ties back from my decision to move from the business to inclusion and diversity a little over a year ago. Just like everyone else, we were all living through times of unprecedented times through the pandemic, standing up for social justice, just going through so much as a world, not even just a country. But it made me realize that the further apart we were, it really, really became more and more important that the closer we came through connecting through our identities, through our lived experiences, and through creating a culture of transparency and trust. And, when it comes down to it, the old saying is that the collective of tides lift all boats. It's so very true, especially in these times.
I love that, Karen. You've had such a fascinating background. I was impressed when you talked about the boards. iMentor sounds really interesting, but I'm even more impressed with Apollo Theater. That's very cool that you're on the board there. Such a famous place.
Yeah.
And I've followed Bill's career, since he became CEO at SAP, and it's great. He has been such a champion of DE&I, and we had your CHRO, Jackie Canny, at our conference. I interviewed her on stage back in March, and that was one of the topics we talked about. But Jackie and I also talked about just, how work has changed and is changing at ServiceNow. And I'd love to get your input on that. How have you seen work change over the past, year or so?
Well, Kevin, I wanted to kind of go back to ServiceNow and what ServiceNow does because, and it really kind of ties into how work has changed and how it's evolved. But so ServiceNow was it's built to deliver, and a lot of times people say, what's ServiceNow? And it's a brand that you see in about 85% of Fortune 500 companies. But, we're this beautifully well-kept as far as what we do. But we are we're built to deliver cross-enterprise workflows that connect people, functions, and systems across the entire enterprise. So you kind of look at it as we are a connected value chain that simplifies work. And just to give you a brief just history exactly on how Bill and the leadership has evolved, because there's been 3 incredible dynamic leaders that have led at an incredible time where they've all brought the best of themselves to the business at that time. So Fred Luddy founded ServiceNow in 2004. He had a vision to create this platform to let employees just root enterprise work through a platform. And Fred was at the time a one-man shop tinkering with ServiceNow's core IT ticketing solution from his home, which is such a cool story.
Yeah.
And in 2012, Frank Slutman came in and took us public. He took us from 100 million to 1 billion.
Yep.
And then in 2017, John Donahue came in and took us to the next chapter from 1 billion to 3 billion. And before he got the call of a lifetime for him to move to Nike, so to move to become, which was his dream. And in 2019, Bill joined us as our next CEO to lead the company to our next phase of growth, and which has been incredible. Certainly, if those of you are following the story of ServiceNow. But ServiceNow, we are in this incredible, great position of exponential growth. We are as everyone knows, we're in this world of tech to compete. So every company out there is a tech company, And it's become just this business strategy that we get to be at the forefront of. So at ServiceNow, what we do, the best way to describe it is we are, again, this connector of workflows. But when you think about like what you actually do on a daily basis that sort of connects workflows, think about like going to the doctors and booking an appointment, or ordering a new laptop, or hiring new team members, filling out paperwork. We are there. These are just some examples of how our platform just simplifies these tasks that can take hours to literally seconds. Even the onboarding experience, when I joined ServiceNow, our platform allows every employee that comes in, you enter the data once, and forms, documents, databases are populated automatically, and then ServiceNow automatically assigns tasks, onboarding tasks, what you need to do, who your hiring buddy would be automatically. So, HR can monitor smoothly the status of each of these tasks. So it's really just, when we talk about, our motto of making the world work better, that's what we do.
And so as you think about work right now, Karen, and look at it going out into the future, have you seen some profound changes to it, or do you think we'll see more changes going forward?
Yeah, so, great question. And Kevin, I think that we're in this space and time where, and I call we're flying the plane while we're building it. So we're constantly looking around the corner, but with the pandemic and just the things that have been going on in this world. But I think that we want at ServiceNow to lead this like once in a generation opportunity to redefine work. Yeah. Particularly as we start to emerge from this pandemic and evaluate. People are out there, certainly evaluating their careers, their priorities, and quite honestly, many people are just exhausted, and searching for this renewed sense of purpose in work and life. And in terms of business, I will tell you that we are growing faster. I've never ever, my 30-year career, have never been a part of a company that has grown this fast. And every 6 months, it's like we are like working for a new company, or there's like something new, an advancement. But we've grown from 5,000 employees in 2019 when Bill joined to 19,000 people.
Oh,
with with most of our, just keep in mind, like we brought these folks on mostly during the pandemic, so we've had to hire most of our employees remotely. So allowing for flexibility for people to work remotely, for us is just like it's opened up this just huge talent pool that we've never had to tap into before or been able to. So we've become this and like most companies, geographically agnostic, and our strategy has really helped to just unify as well as diversify the employee base around, certainly around the world.
I want to pick up on something you said a second ago, just around about a once in a generation opportunity to redefine work. I know. Thanks, Tom. Because I knew we had a poll that
okay, absolutely.
was going to talk to that. So
actually, I've got the polls in the wrong order. Yeah.
Oh,
there we go.
Yeah. Okay.
If we could bring up the other poll.
Yeah, bring up the other polls. There, no
There.
problem. But yeah, if we could have everybody answer this poll, is your organization taking advantage of this once in a lifetime opportunity? Is almost identical to what you said, Karen, to redefine work. I love this question, Tom. I think this is a really cool question. I'm not sure who created it.
I did actually.
Great.
It was our chief marketing officer's idea, and then I created the response option. So give everyone here another few seconds to respond. We'll share the results.
Karen, as people are responding, how would you answer this question?
You know, it's so interesting. I mean, I will tell you how I would not answer that question is we want to get back to the old normal.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, for certainly, yeah, no, it doesn't. Some people do. I mean, it's interesting. Let's just take a look at the information.
Yeah, so the leading response was largely, we've made some changes and anticipate make quite a few more. Small number of people saying yes, revamping everything, about 8%. But yeah, the vast majority either largely or somewhat, not surprisingly, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm right there with everyone else. I mean, I think that, you know, in this world and us having to pivot to remote, you know, just enabling work has really impacted so many of the employee populations. Like, you know, I'm just thinking about this and thinking about like working mothers and who are you know, and it's one thing that we have our eyes on right now at ServiceNow, because unfortunately, you know, working mothers or women actually left the workforce in droves, and we've been able to, you know, sort of maintain it, but close to 5 million women have left the workforce from 2020 to 2022. But at the same time, I think that it's really enabled more women to be able to easily balance the demands of work and family. And also, you know, an interesting thing is, and a conversation I just had a couple months ago, you know, we've been also seeing, you know, people with disabilities have been able to really, I had this really interesting conversation with one of my colleagues a couple of weeks ago, who has been bound to in a wheelchair for the past 20 years. And, you know, he said to me, you know, for the first time, I don't have to wake up and think about logistics of how I'm going to get to work.
Yeah.
And, you know, and during the pandemic, I mean, I'm sitting at my desk and no one even has to know, but I live in New York City and he lives in New York City too. So, you know, the logistics, but it's really opened up an opportunity for so many more of us to be, you know, and people to be sitting at the table with all different dimensions of diversity sitting across.
Yeah, that's the part that I think a lot of the CEOs who have been pushing people to come back to the office kind of miss. That remote and hybrid work has really opened up opportunities for these we call them hidden talent pools, and we've written a whole research study on employing people with disabilities, which I'll send to you after the call, Karen. You may not have seen it. And we focused on all types of disabilities. We've done a lot of work on individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities even, and have been supporting an organization called Best Buddies for years around that.
I love Best Buddies.
Well, so do we. And we'll talk about Best Buddies as well. And, you know, you know, when we talk about working mothers, all these little hidden talent pools, I think are just gems for the right organizations, right? That are being a little bit more, you know, liberal in how they think about things and how they approach things. Yeah.
Kevin, I want to pick up on something that you say, you know, when we're talking about, you know, tapping into communities with people with disabilities. You know, one of the things, I mean, 1.7 billion people live with disabilities across the world, and 70% are invisible or silent.
Right.
You know, so it's really, really interesting. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, we're doing at ServiceNow is we need to know, to build equitable workforces across, we need to understand, you know, where people are, and we're building this level of transparency by having like courageous conversations and people telling their stories. Leaders, I feel as though when just the vulnerability, especially from leadership, it's contagious. So when people feel the opportunity to be able to show up truly human in a space where they feel psychologically safe, and we run a self-ID campaign, and we understand, I mean, even, you know, it's interesting, you take it to another level, 20% of those folks like dyslexia. And how do you build platforms? How do you build technologies and solutions for learning, we're doing that because we know, and also offering it to our clients and partners to be able to utilize and sell across our platform. So, I mean, I just had to that's a big, again, hidden gems.
Yeah. And, just picking up on that, we had a question in the chat from Jackie, who would love to hear how you prioritize the technical pieces that are needed to streamline your onboarding processes. Just a little bit more info on that would be great, Karen.
I mean, so as far as prioritizing, so prioritizing as far as like, we just want to make, any automation, simple tasks, just automate to make it easier. So when you think about the rate that we're growing, 5,000 to 19,000 people, we have to onboard a lot of people in a quick fashion, in a way that the employee experience is so seamless and that our employees can hit the ground running. So really the priority is to, certainly make that process simple. And also the priority is to bring our people in and, and we're going to get to just the whole case of belonging. So it's important for us, when you join ServiceNow, you are joining a community and a culture that really embraces the entire person. So I'm hoping that answers the question as far as, it's our priority is quick, it's smooth, and it's all built on our platform.
And I assume at this point it's largely a virtual process, or have you started incorporating some in-person aspects of onboarding?
Yeah, so right now it is, we've got a mobile app that it's an onboarding, and it's mobile, or you can access it on your PC. But it's a little bit of both, Tom. I mean, I think that right now most of our workers are remote, so everything is done remote. And if we do have the opportunity to get together, but all the onboarding is done remotely through our Now platform.
Yeah. What has the return to office approach been? I mean, I think compared to many other companies probably represented on the call, it sounds like you're more remote and have remained more remote than many. What is the current office situation like and at ServiceNow? Has there been a return to office process, or what's that like?
Yeah, like what's the process, and I'll take you through the how we developed, and then how it's working right now. But to develop the process of the hybrid approach, we conducted a series of competitive analysis and launched a employee survey to really understand individual preferences. We really wanted to understand, just like the pool, like what our employee preference would be. But we started with defining key elements of work, and we developed 3 personas. We developed a flexible, a remote, and an in-office persona. And then we developed policies to enable global and equitable rollout. So when we're talking about flexible, we are talking about people that might be coming into the office like 1 or 2 days a week, and 3 or 3 days a week, for a reason. I mean, we don't see, like everyone else, any reason for people to come into the office and sit there with their headphones by themselves on their keyboard. But we continue to gauge our employee sentiments through employee EVS, employee voice surveys, and ServiceNow live forums, which are held on a quarterly basis. It's a huge town hall where we're constantly asking and taking the pulse of our people. The return to work, what that process has been like, I will tell you that it's been very, very smooth. It really has. We communicate to our employees clearly and often, sometimes too often, but I believe that we cannot over communicate when it comes to really defining and demonstrating what our purpose is. But when we look at it, and everyone knows that they have the option. Working flexible is not just to really balance our lives, and also in terms of your personal comfort. I mean, there's certain folks that are so not comfortable coming into the office. We understand, we recognize, and we embrace that. But one of the components that really differentiates us is our workflow now platform. We're able to bring our employees together in personas through our work locations, being able to reserve workspaces, like simply coming into the office on your mobile app form. So we make it really easy. We also automate this process through, for example, vaccine information, even badge integration. So you join the company, you can receive your everything is done remotely. But we continue to innovate, and we're looking at ways to build collaborative spaces into our offices and encouraging what we call anchor days. So going back to what I said, we want to build a reason for people to come in to meet and to collaborate, and also just new ways of working together.
Karen, there was a op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this weekend by Peggy Noonan that had most of us shaking our head. Certainly I was shaking my head, where she was arguing that that remote work is basically ruining America. was the general headline. And I want to pick up on Cordell's comment here in chat, where he said, "I'm still surprised how many company leaders are requiring people to go back to the office." This is something Tom and I have talked about on this show many times. And so Cordell's curious, why do you think that is? And why are these leaders not studying what practices work? What's happened?
I mean, Kevin and Cordell, I think that there's, obviously there's two schools of thought. And, some people think that if you don't see a person working, then they're not working. But what the pandemic has showed us is that, and I'm just thinking about, the growth trajectory that ServiceNow is on, and also like my time at Accenture. I mean, at Accenture, we had our best quarter ever, like literally 5 months following the pandemic. But I think what has to happen is, leaders have to demonstrate. Here I'm in our Santa Clara office right now, and I'm the only leader that's in the office right now. We might have one or two. So I think that if the leaders aren't demonstrating, hey, it's okay to work from home and getting our work done, there's also boundaries too that we need to talk about, because so many people talk, and I don't know how many, by show of hands or just thumbs up, but how many people in the audience feel that they probably worked harder and more hours during the pandemic? I know, right? I know.
Tom, you didn't raise your hand. I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah, well, I was already virtual before. So
you were. Tom has been virtual for many
20
years, but we're getting some hands raised and thumbs up here.
Right.
Question, so
I know.
Yeah, I know. Actually, on our global town hall yesterday, our CEO said, "Okay, we need to realize, guys, that 6 a.m. is not a normal. It's become a normal time for us for meetings, and we need to get back to that. That's not normal to have 4 or 5 days a week, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. meetings every day." And I think that kind of messaging, because we've just gotten so worked about it, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Kim. And I, with all due respect to my East Coast friends, because I'm an East Coast transplant on the West Coast, some of that is East Coast bias. Where we don't think about time zones, right? And I get that a lot, from the East Coast, living on the West Coast.
Yeah, Kevin, it's so interesting because I live in New York City, and I've spent the last 7 weeks in Santa Clara, and I am kicking myself for even like any meeting, like at even 7:30 to me is just like ungodly, but there is East Coast bias, unfortunately. But, the other thing that I started to do, and I, encourage a lot of our leaders are doing is, if you're sending an email, at some, and I'm going to say ungodly hour, is at the bottom, I do say, I'm sending this email, but I do not expect you to respond back at this hour. And I think what we're doing, and I know we're doing, is that we're trying to encourage our leaders not to send emails, trying to streamline them over the weekend, because it really just sets the precedent that if leaders are working like this, the expectation is that everyone, works hard. But the pandemic is definitely, my hand goes up twice, because I just found myself, and I was thinking at one point, like, am I bored? Or do I just feel the need? But I think everyone, certainly learned from what we experienced over the past 2 years that we need to set boundaries. And Tom, to your point is, I also encourage my folks that, if they don't have to turn on their backgrounds unless they want to, or they don't even have to be on camera unless they want to, because, we've had intimate, peeks into people's homes right now. And, for many, many months, I was managing a team, and, you just didn't know if someone had a dog or a cat or children. So it takes that level of intimacy, or we brought that level of intimacy from home to the office. So,
yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to mention, Tom, we do a meeting every Wednesday morning where we just get together for coffee. The whole company does. And we have different little themes for those meetings. And last week, we did a pet showcase, basically. So everybody brought their pets online and talked about their pets, which was great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, yeah, I'll just riff on that. And this week we had 2 of our team members talk about 2 of the side gigs that they have, hobbies that have turned into revenue generating businesses for them. So that was interesting to see as well. I wanted to pick up on what you said about the email policies and leaders modeling the best way of doing that. I mean, that's one element of the company's culture. And we actually had a poll question that we'd like to bring up at this point on culture in organizations. How healthy, or on the flip side, how toxic is it? And email practices is obviously just one aspect of that. But Zeta, if you could launch this other poll, thank you. Let's get some feedback from folks there. And once again, while they're coming in, would love to hear your perspective on this, Karen. It sounds like ServiceNow's culture is more on the healthy side, which is good, but give some color to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really do believe, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if anybody feels as though, I've had very, peers, and not necessarily at our company or even at Accenture, that have left companies because it's toxic. And, unfortunately, it's a priority, but it'll be interesting to see what the poll is. I mean,
Yeah, so here's the results. I'm not surprising. I think we have a little bit of a bias here, probably with this audience. If you're if you're wanting to attend a call like this, you probably more likely working for a company with a healthy culture, but not entirely. We did have 11% say that it's somewhat toxic. Fortunately, no one on the call today is saying very toxic. Yeah.
I mean, Tom, would be really interesting is as far as like somewhat toxic. So obviously there's, in the chat, if everyone just feels comfortable, like whether it's boundaries, whether it's just leadership, whether it's belonging, that makes the culture toxic. Because I think that, when you think about, and I'm just thinking of a many year career, what defines toxic right now has so many different layers from what defined toxic even like 5 years ago.
Right.
But it'd be interesting to see if everybody's perspective. But it's really interesting. So I'm also the exec sponsor at ServiceNow for Future of Work, which is one of the largest, programs, as I talked about, that we've rolled out. But it falls under D&I when you're talking about future of work. D&I is really at the core of the program. It's really about creating this equitable experience for folks to come in, work remote, and feel like they are they belong and they're treated equitable. So it's interesting if anyone, and I can't really see the chat, if anyone feels the toxicity because of not feeling like there's proximity bias, or as I don't know, if you, Tom and Kevin, you're remote right now, and it's tough to manage teams that might be 20% in the office one day, 50% in the office. You might have a team meeting, and how do you balance the making sure that everyone on that call and on that team feels included in the conversation is a tough one, right?
It certainly is. And we're actually building on some of our earlier culture research and the book that we published on culture, and exploring this issue further, and looking at toxic cultures and what is sort of the cause of some of those toxic cultures, and what kind of effect it has on employees. But I want to pick up on the manager part that you just mentioned, Karen, because I think this is a critical component. What are you doing as an organization to support your managers? They're managing not only these hybrid meetings, but teams that are all over the place. I'd love to hear what you're doing for your managers.
Yeah, so this is really, really important because as like we've grown so fast, and we've got managers that have come in that have just literally just gone from the analysts to in the past 2 years to managers in like less than a nanosecond.
Yeah.
So we have launched a hybrid management training program to help our leaders really hone in on those skills and leverage the tools to lead these high-performing teams, which include topics like growth mindset, includes topics like well-being and inclusion and belonging. So we really, for example, we encourage all of our leaders as part of the process to check in. I think, and I know, like one of the most important, ways to start a meeting is really to ask your folks, how are you? Those 3 words are probably the most powerful things, and really listen. We've also launched and rolled out a manager's frequently asked questions and guides on topics to how to solve for anything in so many different situations. But we have also we have our return to work and COVID response. We have a microsite to provide any kind of updates on policies, which is updated like at this point is probably weekly. But the other thing that we've done is we have built an inclusive language guide. So which is really, really important because, even me, like I've said the wrong things, and, just not knowing. And, we really anchor on really bringing a culture of curiosity and grace, meaning that we want people to be able to bond with people, ask questions, not feel that they can be like judged. So we are creating these spaces for people to have these safe space conversations. As I mentioned, we launched a Courageous Conversation, Be You, with ServiceNow series, where we are bringing. The first was done in Amsterdam. We're doing one per region. We're really sharing our stories, our identity stories, to include language. And as we know, with language is so important right now, and how you say it. So we've done a lot as far as really just.
I just posted in the chat about your inclusive language guide. I think too many managers and frankly a lot of senior execs, they're afraid of saying the wrong thing because you get vilified for it pretty quickly, right? So so they often say too little, right? Or and don't get descriptive enough. So I think it's great that you're helping to
Yeah.
educate folks on that.
You know what, Kevin, I'll share this story, just out of vulnerability, but, in literally, it was before the murder of George Floyd. I was on a town hall at Accenture, and I used the term without knowing at the time, all lives matter. And I will say, my 22-year-old daughter, she tapped, literally right in the middle, she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Mom, put yourself on mute right now." And literally I had, just a couple hundred people on the town hall. And she said, "Trust me." So she went up and she said, "Mom, you can't say that." And she educated me right there. She called me in versus calling me out.
Right.
But, I went back on camera and I said that, I apologize if I offended anyone out there, including myself as a Black person, but I didn't know.
Right.
So I think that what's happening is that people are just afraid to have these conversations, and so they just don't say anything. And, again, I mean, it's just, again, I think that we've got to approach these conversations with curiosity and grace. And, as I mentioned, there's a time, you can call people in. There's a difference of calling people in versus calling people out. Calling people in means really just saying, "Hey, I know you don't understand." But, the bottom line is that language, the way, 1 minute, we're, as a Black population, are referred to BIPOC, the next minute, and, it's interesting because my husband, who is not Black, who's white, he said, I was on a call with my team and then he said, "I just don't know what to say." So a lot of times it's okay to, honestly have those moments of just not knowing, but it's certainly more important.
Well, just, on the theme of diversity, equity, inclusion, and we'll add belonging in there as well, because I think you use that term quite a bit at ServiceNow. Are there any major programs that you've been rolling out lately or are in the midst of that you want to relay to the audience?
Identify, yeah. So as far as inclusion and diversity, I mean, 2022 for us marked a milestone of our 5-year annual diversity. So 5 years ago, we launched our first annual diversity report and really just kicked off this incredible program. But over the past 5 years, we've been able to increase global female leadership representation by 10%. So we are right now about 30%. So we are really growing and focused. And, as Bill say, where we're focused, we progress. Even our underrepresented community or represented groups within leadership are up to 9%. And we have absolutely, increased the feeling of belonging. One of the most beautiful moments that I had at ServiceNow was 4 months ago, I hired Annalena Herrera, who is our VP of D&I. She's my partner. She runs D&I with me. And shortly thereafter, a Latina employee approached me in tears, and she just said, "I'm so thankful because I've never seen anyone that looks like me in a leadership position like this." So there's been so many, and when you hear sentiments of, employees really saying, and it really gives you a sense of we're really, really moving the dial here. Even from 2022, since 2022 or 2020, we've achieved systematic pay equity. So we manage this on an ongoing basis. We continue to do a look. We've hired an outside third party also to help us on an ongoing basis. But from a DE&I perspective, I mean, we have built a program right now that's really this year, a framework that's built on 3 pillars. The first is really empowering and enabling our people. And this is where we are focused on just policies and procedures to make sure that we're building an equitable experience across the entire employee life cycle, to our employee resource, or employee belonging groups. We call them EBGs instead of
interesting.
ERGs. Yeah. So we've increased representation. So 41% of our folks belong to an EBG. And interestingly enough, I mean, as most companies probably saw, the rise of memberships of these employee belonging groups have grown significantly, just because, it gives us an opportunity to form a community, especially at times where I think we need to come together. This year alone, I mean, with the exponential growth, our employee resource groups have grown 33%. The other thing that we're doing is learning. We have actually, it's really cool, as a technology. We are putting a lot of our teams through the virtual learning experiences through the Oculus glasses. So it's really just taking learning to the next step. I mean, I feel like when you have the opportunity to put on those glasses and actually live in the shoes and make those decisions, whether it's in unconscious bias decisions, but sort of privately in your own sort of universe, and it just gives us a whole nother dimension. The second thing that we're doing is really hiring with intent. And we are really taking a look, looking at how we're hiring, and how we are spanning, for example, how we are right now building programs to really try to recruit neurodiverse talent, which is, this untapped talent out there. How we are building returnship programs through partnering with programs like iRelaunch and the Mom Project, to really help to bring women and underrepresented groups back into the workforce that might have stepped out. The other thing that we have is we have a program called Next Gen, which enables, it's a program that trains folks to use the Now platform, ServiceNow platform. Mm-hmm. And we employ folks, and it also gives them the certificates to go out to other companies, and where certainly other companies are hiring to support our ServiceNow platform. And then the third column is what we call Amplify D&I. So when you look at it, D&I and ESG are really just like the face of who we are as a society. So how we are showing up with our clients. Building partnership programs like Women in Tech. We've got 5 minutes, so I can go on and on. But Women in Tech, where we are bringing our customers together with our teams, our sales teams, and doing a lot of learning through each other. And also how we're out there and showing up in the community. From a community service perspective, our folks are out there. It's up like 40% as far as people volunteering in the community.
That's so important. I think it's a new thing too, relatively new thing for a lot of organizations, where the workforce can really come together to help the community. I love, the work that so many companies are doing in the communities that they operate in from that perspective. And I also love just the more attention to well-being. We've got just a couple minutes left, but I know that you've done some work on mental and emotional well-being, all part of holistic well-being. Tom just brought up the slide, or maybe Zeta did, on our research around this area. Can you just quickly tell us, Karen, what you're doing in this area?
It's interesting. So as I mentioned, I'm the exec sponsor of Future of Work, and we are now we've now launched the program Future of Work, Wellbeing at the Center. So we put our people at the center of everything we do. Every decision we make as an organization is with people in mind and their well-being as a priority. One of the things that I do want to talk about that I'm so happy is that we actually just launched 6 new just well-being days. Days that the company, as a company, and it was hard to get to those 6, because when you look at all the functions, you've got sales, you've got your product and your engineering group, you've got your HR. So how do you pick those days? But as a company with burnout is just at its all-time high in the industry, we pick those 6 days of the year where everyone just shuts down, and it's lovely to see what people are doing. We ask you to post what you're doing on those well-being days. But again, well-being is certainly just at the forefront of everything we do. As part of our, as I mentioned, as far as our manager training, we are doing a lot of training on well-being and how to to tap into your folks. In Europe, we also are piloting this program. It's called Wellbeing Lifesavers. So we are training certain people inside the organizations or leaders on how to be like first line of defense, like those people that you could go to and talk to. So there's just a lot that we're prioritizing mental health. It's interesting. I did a interview with Adam Grant last week, and he said it's okay to call in sick. We should all feel like we have the opportunity, or we should have the liberty to call in sad as well. So that's our culture.
Oh, that's fantastic. In fact, we have a whole well-being exchange. We'll need to get you or others from ServiceNow to talk about some of those programs as part of that exchange, because it sounds fascinating what you're doing.
I like that. I like that too. That what you just said, call in sad, it's sort of to combat overload and burnout in particular. But I really like, and we've done a little less formally perhaps, but we've done this thanks to you, Kevin, at I4CP, where you've given us some extra well-being days in effect sprinkled throughout the year, where again, everyone is off. And that's a big difference. If you think about the difference between that concept and having sick days, which obviously if you're truly sick, you shouldn't be working, you can't function, can't work. So it's obvious that we'd have that. That's sort of table stakes. And then paid time off, vacation, which you take. But both of those come with a certain level of stress for the individual, because the rest of the company is still plugging away. Whereas these well-being days, the way you've structured them, everyone is off. And whether it's contiguous around, adding more days to Thanksgiving or 4th of July, or whether they're just sprinkled separately as one-off days, the point that not every, that everyone takes them off together really helps for people to then come back and be more productive. So I love that.
Yeah,
me too. Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time, Karen. I want to make sure I take the time to thank you for being with us today. You're just a marvelous guest. Hopefully we can have you back and in other forums as well, sharing some of your wisdom and experiences. So
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And don't forget, we'll have Rob Cross with us on August 18th for our next Getting Hybrid Work Right call. Rob is just a wealth of information, particularly around connectivity, and he'll talk about his latest book and an upcoming book that he's got being published very shortly. So please join us for that. Don't forget to sign up for our conference as well. We have folks like Karen and Rob speaking at our conference every year. So we're looking forward to having some great folks in March in Scottsdale. Hopefully everybody can make it next in 2 weeks and on that 18th. But until then, have a great, safe, happy, healthy week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Karen. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.